The Star Wars Rebels Season 4 review is finally here. We've been through a lot of shenanigans with this annoying, disruptive, boring waste of time that dared to call itself a television show. I can, at the very least, say that at least Dave Filoni knew not to drag this shit show out as long as the Clone Wars, because it really wasn't worth it. Before I had even seen Rebels, I saw that Season 4 being the last one was weird, because as the sequel show to the Clone Wars, it was 2 seasons short of its predecessor at the time. But I guess it makes sense. Given the smaller scope of Rebels, focusing primarily on one group of rebels, it's kind of weird that the show lasted for as long as it did. Because once again, the show is a fillery waste of time full of cardboard cutout characters. Come to think of it, Rebels abandoned the style the Clone Wars had, which is probably why it didn't translate so well as a sequel show. Where was the booming charismatic announcer, for example? You'd think that's something important they missed? I also would have thought Filoni would have seized the opportunity to fuck over the entire galactic civil war instead of the early years of the rebellion's rise. Something about Rebels always just didn't fall in line with the Clone Wars. Then it clicked. Rebels is probably a Filoni show in its purest form. Like, George Lucas among others had a bunch load to do with the Clone Wars, but this was the show that demonstrated how Filoni can't make a show by himself. In fact, did you know that his original pitch for the Clone Wars was incredibly close to what Rebels ended up being? Yeah. His pitch for the Clone Wars was basically to make it a small crew during the Clone Wars doing shenanigans, with each character having their own sort of gimmick. Maybe the Clone Wars would have gotten more overall scorn if it was purely a phony Filoni mess. God, do I despise the overrated cowboy. He's in the stages of making Star Wars his own, and there's nothing we can do about it. The time for stopping him is long past. And now I guarantee most Star Wars content moving forward has direct influence coming from him. Anyways, Star Wars Rebels Season 4 is terrible. Just like the rest of the show. It's still boring, it's still pointless, and even the fact that this is the finale, and this is their chance to spill all their cards on the table, they end up being generic 1s and 2s instead of a full deck of draw 4 cards. This was the show's last chance to tell us it wasn't just one big waste of time. But it's clear the show wasn't going to improve. In fact, we've got the usual when it comes to the episode formula. Although, interestingly, we get a double pack of 2-parters that consist of the first 4 episodes. However, that doesn't mean what happens is so important that it was worth a 2-parter. So with all that being said, let's not waste any more time. And see me rip into Star Wars Rebels yet again, since Filoni wanted this shit to be over as much as I did, for different reasons of course. So episodes 1 and 2 are titled Heroes of Mandalore, and this very episode does not at all pick up where Season 3 left off. You'd think that the loss of the Rebel base on Atollon would be a big deal, right? No! Instead, we don't even get the after effects of Thrawn's attack right away. Instead, we're getting 2 episodes dedicated to Mandalore. And for the first time in this show, we actually get to see somewhat of the effect Imperial occupation had on Mandalore. There's not a lot, of course, but it's something. We start with Sabine and friends hiding in a conveniently dug trench, in which they're able to peek out and spy on a small Imperial prison. You gotta love with how they start with them being in some trench where they can hide away from the Empire. It's not even like they're that far away where the Imperials can't spot them. Ezra in particular is equipped with a jetpack, an item that he doesn't even get to test before now, and they just brush it off as just, oh, you'll get the hang of it, as if the threat level is low. And yeah, of course the threat level is low, since there's nothing but standard Imperial troopers guarding the place. Security seems incredibly lax. Not exactly maximum security. We also get our first dose of Chopper being an annoying metalhead, before Sabine decides to go for a frontal attack on the prison. Their goal is apparently to rescue Sabine's father, who was referenced earlier as being in Imperial custody or something. So yeah, Sabine gives the go-ahead to attack, and they just go to town on the Imperials, wrecking the shit out of them. Something that caught me completely off guard, however, is how an Imperial jet trooper managed to stun Sabine out cold, which is odd because when has anyone ever done a dent on Sabine? The Imperials actually get the advantage here, and use her as a bargaining chip. Although guess who shows up? No, seriously, just have a guess. After being absent from the entire show, and surprisingly never making an appearance prior, we get Bo-Katan showing up to save the day. So yeah, the Imperials are cleared out, just like a video game. But it turns out Sabine's father ain't here.
What a surprise.
Of course, it's never that simple. Anyways, they get a report or something that tells them that Sabine's father is being moved by a convoy back to the Mandalorian capital of Sundari, and he's slated for execution when he gets there. Why the Imperials who have custody of him now can't execute him immediately, I have no idea. In this instance, I think that the idea that it's got to be done publicly is a poor one. We also get word of the big bad, the Imperial Governor of Mandalore, known as Tiber Saxon. You already heard me rant about how they killed off Gar Saxon so quickly, and so I guess they just had to introduce a brother character to take his place. Spoilers, but Tiber Saxon dies in the exact same two-parter he appears in. So I'm really wondering why they couldn't just make it Gar Saxon. His death didn't really have any significance in Season 3. I love how they're going with that trope of, oh no, we killed a character, so let's just bring in another character, label him a sibling, and call it a day. Do you want to know what the difference is between Gar and Tiber Saxon?
Absolutely nothing.
They're the same goddamn character. High-ranking leaders of Mandalore who sided with the Empire and have next to no personality on top of that. They don't have any cool gimmicks either. They're just plain and boring and could have easily been a random video game enemy. Anyways, we also get a scene of Sabine offering Bo-Katan the Darksaber, which she declines for some reason, only to have the opposite mentality in the Mandalorian. I also gotta say how weird Bo-Katan looks in the Rebels art style. Like seriously, there's something very off about this character in Rebels. Also, how old is Bo-Katan? Her age is never officially given, but I assume she's in her 30s during the Clone Wars. Let's be generous and assume she's exactly 30. That would mean during this arc, she would be at least 48. Then if you add the Mandalorian on top of that, she'd be like what, late 50s? Then if you consider the nonsensical thing Jon Favreau said about the time gap, where it was like 2 years or something, by Mandalorian Season 3, she'd be fucking 60. Yeah, this is another case of not keeping track of the character's age, and getting the voice actress to reprise her role in live action, even if she's too young for it. Her hair is nowhere near greying at this point, and at this rate, she'll only die from the plague known as gingivitis. Not only was she a T-word who was in league with Osama bin Vizsla, but she's also a ginger with no soul. Ugh. You all know I hate Bo-Katan. Worst redemption in Star Wars ever, because she never faces the consequences of her actions after Osama bin Vizsla's dead. She just joins the good side, and she doesn't really atone for what she's done properly. Since she flips like a coin and the writers expect you to deal with it, there's no proper moment where she does something heroic that is meant to signal back to any horrible thing she did. Since the flip was oh so sudden, she stops her T-wordic tendencies immediately. The point is that she expresses basically next to no sign of her previous actions. You could at least have her proposed deeds reminiscent of a die-hard villain against the Empire, and being insistent on it or something. Because the fact that I'm supposed to buy that the same gal who is in league with Osama bin Vizsla suddenly has a morality is laughable. I don't know if I properly explained the problem with Bo-Katan. I found it jarring that there's next to no acknowledgement for this gal's dark deeds. Anyways, since Sabine's dad ain't here, they then have to find the escort that does have her father captive. There's a scene where Kanan talks to Hera through a hologram about priorities or something, but I was honestly not interested. I just wanted to mention it because it does take up maybe a minute of the episode. Anyways, we get a scene of Sabine's father Ulrich, who is not at all fussed out with being a prisoner. In fact, when told that they're going to get to the Mandalorian capital Sundari, Ulrich remarks that he loves the architecture of the city. Then the Imperial Super Commando talking to him informs him that he's going to be executed there. We don't even get anything like Ulrich's expression changing, because then we've got the good guys attacking the convoy. Unsurprisingly, they go to town on the convoy. And it makes me wonder why the hell they're called Imperial Super Commandos if they're so fucking useless. As such, the Imperials have such bad aim. I was assessing the blaster fight closely, and I just found it embarrassing to watch. It's not even like the good guys are using cover to shield themselves. It's just that the bad guys are such bad shots. You gotta love how Rebels perpetuates every stereotype about the Empire to 11. The villain kills his own men cliche. Incompetent stormtroopers that can't aim properly. You name it. Also, I don't know why it took me until season 4 to say, but the stormtroopers look so puny and small. It's like they're subconsciously designed to be as non-threatening as possible, by almost making the helmets cutesy or something. I don't know how to describe it, but looking at stormtroopers and literally anything else, you'll see a difference. Like, I wasn't very intimidated by stormtroopers in something like Dark Forces, but they actually resembled soldiers you're supposed to fear in universe. I have to wonder why the art style for Rebels wasn't 100% consistent with the Clone Wars, despite being the sequel show. It's not like the art style was improved. So to make a long story short, after the fight scene with absolutely zero tension, Sabine yells at Ezra to hurry the fuck up and free her dad. And upon boarding the transport, Ulrich asks Ezra if he's with Sabine. And Ezra misinterprets the question as, "Are you and Sabine in a romantic relationship?" And this completely wastes time in the heat of the moment, as the transport is about to go off a hill. Ezra then gives Ulrich his jetpack, and Ezra gets out by simply using force jump. This spectacle was, of course, completely pointless, and wouldn't have happened if Ezra wasn't wasting time, but the thing is, that waste of time means nothing, because the rescue was a success. Sabine takes off her helmet, and there's the whole huggy trope you've seen a million times before now. The important shit happens when we see Governor Saxon order, quote, the weapon to be unleashed on Sabine's family. And so Sabine gets a transmission from her mother and brother, in which it switches to static. They go over to the area where Sabine's other family members were fighting, and see everything burnt to a crisp. And while this is supposed to be a dramatic, heartbreaking moment, I had such a sadistic grin as Sabine starts crying and exclaiming that this was all her fault because the weapon that was just used was something she designed. Yeah, this is where the Sabine as a scientist backstory comes full circle, and that's the end of part 1. In part 2, and some alert viewers may have noticed that I didn't play the "and it's gone" gag during all this, but in the very next episode, to spoil any sort of consequences whatsoever, it turns out that Ursa and Tristan survived. Yes, I'm not making this up. You can see it on screen right now. I really want to say that this is a very intricate what-if fan animation, but nope, this is the final product. It seems every single named rebel in the show has plot armor like you've never seen before. Like, what was the point of part 1's cliffhanger if the two people Sabine cares about survived the whole thing? And it's also super convenient that only these two survived, as every other clan ran Mandalorian in the vicinity became the next shit meal on Kitchen Nightmares. This really just gives off the impression that the weapon Sabine designed has a super short range, and since it's a weapon specifically designed to breach Mandalorian armor, that's just pathetic. Some Imperial Super Commandos show up, and despite not having that hard of a time fending them off, Kanan yells to Sabine that it's urgent that they flee, which is not the impression I got actually watching the fight scene. So now it's an aerial combat scene when help arrives to pick everyone up. Bo-Katan and Ezra go outside with their jetpacks to take out the TIE fighters pursuing them. Okay, this is probably a nitpick, but I couldn't help but notice that portable jetpacks can keep up with TIE fighters. Like, how powerful are these things? We then get a scene with Governor Saxon demonstrating the power of the weapon to Grand Admiral Thrawn, which is his first appearance in the season. I can say at least that they address the fact that the weapon has a piss poor range, so I guess that's something. Basically, to make a long story short, Thrawn suggests that the weapon could be extended by its creator, Sabine Wren. Now, as if Sabine is going to help finish the damn weapon, but I wonder why you can't get someone else to do it. I guess the whole thing is some Oppenheimer drama shit, but that's literally my only fill-in for this question. Also, upon hearing that their goal is to capture Sabine alive, I just knew that they were never going to be able to do that, at least for an extended period of time, so I was not on the edge of my seat at all. We all know what's gonna happen. Sabine and the rebels are gonna come out on top like they always do. That's the formula. Anyways, we cut back to Bo-Katan's escape ship, in which Tristan questions Sabine on the weapon. Sabine insists that she destroyed it, but doesn't know how the Empire could have replicated it. Bo-Katan is more angry, and grips Sabine, asking why she'd make such a weapon. For someone who was once in league with Osama bin Vizsla, I find this hypocritical, but anyways, Sabine states that she was arrogant and it was a personal challenge for herself. I don't know about you, but that sounds even more Mary Sue-ish. Like, it sounds like Sabine had no issue creating this super weapon or whatever. I also gotta wonder why Sabine's so good at everything. She's good enough at art for Grand Admiral Thrawn to admire it, she's a skilled warrior, despite being like 16 or 17 or something, and she's an intelligent inventor, much like Buddy Pine in The Incredibles. But the difference in that movie is that in the prologue, they clearly established that Buddy is still a naive kid, who due to bad circumstances grew to resent Mr. Incredible, and then 15 years later in the main movie, he's clearly become psychotic to the point of no return. The Incredibles is an extremely intricate story when it comes to the villain Syndrome, but that's the gist of it. I've seen Syndrome's story be the subject of heavy debate among Pixar fans. And what exactly causes villainy? Too bad Sabine isn't very complex, as like all the other characters in this show. Anyways, after the commercial break, we get the ship landing at Bo-Katan's hideout, or whatever the hell this is supposed to be. Apparently Bo-Katan didn't announce that Sabine was with her when landing, because when they get out, a bunch of the nameless Mandos pull their weapons at Sabine, and they're all furious at her over the weapon she created. As always, Sabine isn't overcome by pressure or guilt, not really, and she literally confidently speaks up, and just like a battle leader, proposes that they can fight each other, or they can work together to take it down. Bo-Katan backs her up, of course, and predictably everyone lowers their weapons. And afterwards, there's no long-lasting resentment. So yeah, they do a little meeting in which they opt to discuss how they're going to get rid of the weapon, and it's a generic plan to split up into two teams with two separate goals. One to destroy the data about the weapon, and one to destroy the weapon itself. And they've basically got to attack Governor Saxon's Star Destroyer. In the middle of the meeting, Fan Rao speaks to Bo-Katan, and they both mutually discuss their admiration for Sabine, which of course is even more of a nudge towards Mary Sue than before. In the action sequence that follows, they jetpack into the Star Destroyer at night, and of course, they've got the element of surprise, which is completely unrealistic. I can't believe they're making things this easy for the good guys. And they were previously talking about how hard it would be to breach the governor's personal Star Destroyer. There's even some casual banter, which killed the already non-existent tension. They even pull an unfunny joke where the weapon Sabine created was unironically called the Duchess, which Bo-Katan is startled by, since it refers to her sister. Yes, they completely mutilate this scene after it had already been cut up into little pieces. In fact, they're only detected due to their own clumsiness, as a random TIE fighter pilot climbing down a ladder easily sees Ezra. And so yeah, they should be compromised, but you all know that it's not going to be that hard. As always, the good guys go to town on the Imperials, and Sabine and Bo-Katan make it as far as the core of the weapon itself. And then the writers decide to finally flip the tables all of a sudden, and they're both downed by the weapon's electric shock as Governor Saxon comes in to taunt Sabine. Some random super commando from before openly questions Saxon on his decision to keep Sabine alive, although Saxon, for no good reason, decides to torture his lackey too.
Wow, what an asshole.
After some shenanigans, Sabine pretends to upgrade the weapon after Bo-Katan's life is threatened, and Saxon without caution activates it, and the weapon shocks him and everyone with Stormtrooper armor instead. Yes, I'm being serious. Saxon just took Sabine's word after she fiddled with the weapon for less than 5 fucking seconds. This creates 2 plot holes. 1, why is Saxon a fucking idiot? And 2, how did Sabine adjust the output of a weapon in less than 5 seconds? Mary Sue, ladies and gents, and this was a resolution that was completely unearned. That's why they suddenly throw in a conflict at the end when the Empire's already been defeated, where Sabine wants to torture Governor Saxon endlessly. Bo-Katan of course talks her out of it, further going to show how sudden her personality change was from when she was Osama bin Vizsla's right-hand woman. Anyways, Sabine decides to destroy the weapon, which means the thing's about to blow, and take the Star Destroyer with it. And thus, they all escape, and the Star Destroyer explodes in a Michael Bay fashion. The only compliment I'm giving is that the escape music is actually kinda decent, and probably would have fit better in a better written show. Anyways, they close the episode with Sabine deciding to give Bo-Katan the Darksaber, to rally the clans of Mandalore against the Empire. A story decision made pointless by the Mandalorian, but let's not talk about that. By the way, we're only up to episode 2 of 15, but since I want this shit to be over as soon as possible, let's get into the next episode. This is the episode where we see that the rebellion is A-OK, and the loss of Chopper Base was no big deal. Since Season 4 did not start with all of the Ghost crew present, this is where they roll Zeb and Hera back into the show. Everyone is in high spirits. The crew that was on Mandalore all land on Yavin 4 and proceed to make themselves at home. They make this passive remark that the base has got so many rebel cells combined, but still not enough to take on the Empire. But even with this information, Ezra remains optimistic. Okay, listen, I know a key theme of Star Wars is hope, but Ezra talks like he's not very pressured by the might of the Empire. That tells me that the Empire is not very mighty. Ugh. So Zeb shows them around the place briefly, and we get Hera and her squadron doing a rough landing onto the base. So yes, everything is hunky-dory. No consequences, no impact. This show literally only saves its trap cards for the very end. Anyways, everyone is happy, yada yada, and then Agent Kallus comes in, except he's no longer an ISB agent. I've gotten so used to calling him Agent though, that I'm going to continue calling him that. He's got a complete makeover from an Imperial to a Rebel. You already know how bullshit his turnaround was, so I'm not going to repeat myself. Anyways, Kallus calls them into the briefing room because Mon Mothma wishes to speak to them. Upon entering the room, they get a transmission from Bail Organa, who tells them about a new Imperial relay station in the Jalindi system, which apparently previously confirms intel given by Saw Gerrera, leader of the Partisans.
The 3 of us this morning, I'm the only one this evening, but I must go on. The frontiers are my prison. Oh, the wind is blowing through the graves. The wind is blowing. Freedom soon will come. Then will come from the shadows.
As such, since Saw's in this episode, that means we're getting a huge forced-in dilemma to this episode. They talk about how effective Saw Gerrera is at obtaining intel, but Mon Mothma reminds them that Saw Gerrera is a war criminal, and probably obtained that intel with less than desirable means, like torturing prisoners. Of course, the thing is, the Empire is so pathetically defeatable that this shoved-in dilemma is completely unearned. The concept of fighting clean versus dirty is not an overarching theme of this show. Rather, it's just an unearned, underbaked concept exclusive to this episode, and the episode with Saw Gerrera previously. Strong story themes are absent in Rebels, and it's really down to one-off episodes that deal with a question or concept of the week, rather than it being an overarching theme. because there are no consequences whatsoever for the rebels' actions. As I said, the loss of Chopper Base meant nothing at all, and that's why it's pointless. My suggestion is that if you want the audience to think about these questions, you should make it an intricate part of the story instead of a one-off. Make the Empire a strong totalitarian regime that plays as dirty as possible. And the rebels have the choice of either meeting the Empire with more dirt or playing by the rules. There are both long and short-term solutions to both approaches. We don't get any deeper nuance beyond we fight clean because it's right. There's no exploration of if the rebellion fights dirty, they won't last very long, since the Empire can afford to be dirty way more, and given they have the control, they can demonize the rebels. It's supposed to be a war of hearts and minds, correct? A brutal evil empire that can do whatever it wants, and a rebellion seeking to restore freedom to the galaxy. They don't really give us the implications of what an evil rebellion would look like. Because if you wanted to take some real life inspiration, freedom fighters can be corrupted and replace one dictator with another. Anyways, during the meeting, they proposed that they could hijack the relay system and use it to track the Imperial fleet wherever they go. So yeah, they decide that's the mission. Ezra then complains that Lethal's counting on them and asks when the hell they're going to provide full support to his people. And Mon Mothma basically tells them that they're not ready for open war with the Empire. And helping Lethal would leave thousands of others completely vulnerable, which is complete nonsense because being a rebel is easy. This is a scene I cannot take seriously in the slightest. So after this, Ezra goes out to talk to Kanan, and he vents that Saw Gerrera seems to be the only one who can make a difference, which again is a complete joke of a statement given how easy being a rebel in the show is. The only dilemma I can actually remember from this boring ass show is when Saw Gerrera held the Geonosian egg hostage, and he wasn't even an Imperial. So this conversation, like the last one, is completely unearned. Then, of course, we've got an infiltrator droid broadcast a message to Saw Gerrera, to all of the mainstream rebellion. I'm just going to assume Saw already knew the location of the Yavin 4 base, because if he found it on his own, that's a whole can of worms I don't want to get into. Anyways, Mon Mothma doesn't order the shutdown of the broadcast droid right away, instead choosing to speak to Saw. She and Saw argue back and forth, with Saw talking about how this war needs to be fought on the rebellion's terms, not the Empire's. When Mon Mothma says that Saw has proven himself a criminal, Saw responds that the Empire consider them both criminals and that he, quote, at least chooses to act like one, which is a line that took me out of the story, because that sounds like Saw's flat out admitting that he's the bad guy out to cause harm. It's like when a villain directly describes themselves as evil, because that's stupid. Every villain in a story should see themselves as the hero. To be fair, however, both voice actors actually do a good job with their argumentative back and forth. It's just a shame I don't care at all about what's going on. So let's get on with the next scene. We cut to the Ghost in hyperspace, talking about jamming the Imperial relay, blah blah, and then we've got Hera doubting herself on how they're fighting the Empire. Oh so blah blah. So anyways, they go to the relay on Jalindi. So Sabine, Ezra and Chopper do some skydiving, and narrowly avoid tipping the Imperials off to the fact that they've arrived. Because apparently if they used their jetpacks too soon, they would have alerted the Empire to their presence. I don't know if that's lore accurate, but whatever. Anyways, an Imperial light cruiser shows up, and Sabine and Chopper slice into the relay. Although apparently they've accidentally patched into the main comms circuit, and Ezra's got to do some more of that pretending through the comms. He puts on a fake British accent or something, which, speaking of which, why are those always corny when an American does it? Anyways, he sounds obviously unprofessional, and when asked to identify himself, Ezra responds that he's Commander Brom Titus, and the guy on the other end reveals that he is Brom Titus. So this is one bizarre coincidence. Ezra just happened to try to pretend to be the guy he's talking to. In case you don't remember, Brom Titus is another Imperial supporting antagonist. He had one-off appearances in both Season 2 and 3. You probably know the ones. This is so contrived. And also, small galaxy I must say. And I probably already said that before. This extremely bad luck results in shenanigans. There's this stupid visual gag where after the Empire takes back control of the relay dish and causes Ezra and Sabine to go falling down due to the rotation of the dish, Bron Titus looks through his viewport and sees Ezra and Sabine, and what absolutely kills any and all investment is when Ezra waves to Brom and Sabine slaps his hand to get him to stop. Ugh. This is so dumb. So the pair then decide to blow up the relay, a change to the plan. Tension during all this is obviously extremely low. Some stock suspense music you could probably get off a website plays, as the rebels go to town on the Imperials. We also get the Ghost being chased by 2 TIE defenders. And then another ship arrives to help the rebels. As you probably guessed, it's commanded by Saw, and he offers Ezra and Sabine a way out. And they take his offer of help. Right away, you can see where this is going. He's going to try and sway them to his cause. Anyways, Saw brings in some explosives, and they all get out of there as the radar goes full Michael Bay. Right afterwards, Saw Gerrera says, quote, "Now that's how you deal with the Empire," with both Ezra and Sabine visibly grinning. I just want to point out, however, that Saw Gerrera has not committed a war crime here. It's nearly the end of the episode, and I just realized that they don't show Saw doing anything bad. They just allude to it and make a statement about how he's this dirty rebel that makes a bad example, blah blah. When the Ghost shows up the minute after, Gerrera denies their request to hand over Ezra and Sabine, stating there's no time as a Star Destroyer shows up. Then they all jump into hyperspace and that's the episode. Alright, so as you probably gathered, this is just an episode with a message of the day sort of formula that a lot of kids shows seem to have. And it's not even backed up by the rest of the show because, as I established before, this is the Galactic Civil War on piss easy mode. The Empire is easily defeatable with or without behaving as a rebel. This is not some deep commentary on how rebellions can often replace one dictatorship with another. It's just a lesson of the episode before it's completely forgotten about. Unearned is how to describe this episode in one word. Anyways, since this is a two-parter, let's get on with it. We then pick up where we left off with Gerrera blatantly giving out his ideology. The fact that following orders will only get them so far, and they've got to take control of their own destiny and whatnot. Saw asks them for assistance in one of his missions. Need I remind you that neither Ezra or Sabine are adults yet. He needs to steal some cargo being loaded aboard a civilian freighter. He acts all friendly and tells them that they can go back to doing chores for Mon Mothma if they wish, but he would really appreciate the help. Of course, Ezra and Sabine are immediately on board, not asking for any catch that Gerrera might have up his sleeve. I mean, the dude did say that they're supposed to be stealing cargo being loaded onto a civilian freighter. That's an immediate red flag if I've ever seen it. It's like these two characters have learned absolutely nothing from working with Saw Gerrera. So basically the pair and Chopper, naive as they are, follow Saw Gerrera across the facility, making their way to a cargo transport right before it enters hyperspace. They do try to create an aura of mystery, with Ezra sensing a presence or something, describing it almost like singing. But that's about the closest thing this episode has to a hook. The whole thing plays out like a stealth action video game, as they evade patrols of stormtroopers, all of which come in pairs of 2, which makes it a huge mystery why they can't just jump them. They never had any problem doing that the last 50 times a pair of useless stormtroopers were around. Chopper easily obtains intel on the ship's manifest logs or something, and they figure out the important crap is in hold 12. Let me say firsthand that the stormtroopers are as useless as ever. And there's that classic moment where they hesitate to shoot and pay the ultimate price for wasting their time and the audience's time to make things super easy for the good guys. Anyways, they discover the cargo is a batch of prisoners who, after talking with them for a bit, find out that they're all power experts and they were taken by force, blah blah. This, of course, is the poorly set up dilemma, where Saw Gerrera is not interested in freeing the prisoners, and is being needlessly selfish. Ugh. This feels so forced, and is all done to sell the point that Saw Gerrera is a bad rebel. So while Chopper tries to escort them to the escape pods, The other three decide to follow Ezra, who is attracted to the presence he sensed earlier through the Force, and comes across a squad of Death Troopers. But let me tell you how pathetic these guys are. Despite the fact that they're supposed to be 10 steps up from regular stormtroopers, yeah, the rebels go to town on them just as easily, and it's embarrassing to watch. Also, this is definitely a case of poor attention to detail on Filoni's part, or whoever the hell specifically wrote this episode. But Filoni was the overseer, so let's just point the finger at him. But aren't Death Troopers taught a secret code language? Why is it then that they're all communicating in clear, audible English? I'm pretty sure that the Rogue One Visual Dictionary or something set up the fact that they can communicate outside of Galactic Basic to keep their objectives secret. Not so much here. Pretty much all but one of them gets wasted immediately. You know you're watching a great show when the specialist troopers get taken out on a whim. I was just scoffing the whole way through this episode. Anyways, turns out the thing the Death Troopers were protecting was a massive kyber crystal, which immediately gets hit and becomes incredibly unstable. The surviving Death Trooper name drops Director Krennic, the main bad guy from Rogue One. In general, Chopper, despite leading all the prisoners, is a total dickwad. On Ezra and Sabine's side, they openly disagree with Saw Gerrera on what the hell they're supposed to do next. And this leads to the pair of them blindly trusting Saw to stay guard by the kyber crystal while they go into the engine room to stop the ship. This blind trust gets them nowhere, as Saw Gerrera decides to stun both of them out cold as soon as they get to the engine room. As soon as the pair wake up, they discover themselves cuffed, and have a brief argument with Saw, with the latter stating out loud that he will do whatever it takes to be the victor, which of course sounds like he knows he's the bad guy. You know what? Let's just get this over with. I'm done talking about this stupid episode. Basically what happens is that the crystal is set ablaze, with it about to explode. Saw Gerrera and the pair go their separate ways, as Saw bolts with his co-pilot, as well as Ezra, Sabine and Chopper getting on an Imperial shuttle with all the prisoners and managing to outrun the kyber crystal as it goes full Michael Bay, with the Ghost showing up a mere minute later to save the day. The prisoners decide to join the rebellion, and that's the episode. There's a little bit with Kanan talking about how he's unsure if the Empire can weaponize a kyber crystal, and that's the episode. And that's all, folks. Writing this part of the script took me a while, because I'd probably just be repeating myself. So in short, it's the same old problems you'd expect out of this shit show. Anyways, let's get on with the next episode. So the episode after that is called The Occupation. And basically, this is the beginning of the end for the show. You know how they've been talking about helping Lothal episode after episode without actually doing anything? Yeah, well here, they're about to go to Lothal and stay there. After Ezra's frustration that he couldn't help the Lothal rebels, Mon Mothma calls the Ghost crew in and informs them that they can all go to Lothal, since they received a message from Ryder that explains that there's a new development in the TIE Defenders, and the rebellion needs to know what it is. Yeah, so the Ghost crew have the perfect excuse to go to Lothal. Is it just me, or are they just making everything too easy just so they can go to Lothal again? They were talking so much about how liberating Lothal was set back after Thrawn's attack on Chopper Base, and now we're 5 episodes in after that very attack, and they get to go back to Lothal? This is all just completely unearned, pretty much. I expected at least a couple more episodes at the very least, building up to a return on Lothal, with the rebels getting a clear shot to go back or something. But this just happens out of nowhere. Anyways, all the characters prepare to go to Lothal. And to make things super easy for the good guys, they say that Vizago, that Devaronian guy, can get them past the blockade. Basically, as payment, they give him a fuckload of puffer pigs. Remember those? It feels like there's a scene missing here. But I guess to the show's credit, showing a scene of the rebels acquiring the puffer pigs would probably feel like a complete waste of time anyways. So I can understand why they skipped over it. Still though, it feels like there's a scene missing. Maybe they could have just had Rebel leadership pay Vizago to smuggle them in, and they would have avoided the issue altogether. Okay, anyways, Captain Rex and not so Agent anymore Callus are given command of the Ghost while they are away. Getting past the Imperial blockade is piss easy. They do try to throw in the excuse that they detected additional life forms, but they still allow the ship to land. As they descend towards the surface, Ezra and everyone sees that Lothal has been reduced to a wasteland. Vegetation and plant life burnt down. And basically the whole planet looks unrecognizable. How much is the time gap? Because the span of time feels very short here. Anyways, you then realize why they brought in the puffer pigs. It's so the Ghost crew could escape the ship and make the Empire believe the additional life forms were indeed the puffer pigs. Tension as usual is relatively low, as Zeb easily scares them, causing them to puff up and topple the Imperials and Vizago. Yeah, so they just bolt from the ship, leaving Vizago behind to be arrested. I guess there's nothing objectively wrong here, but it's still worth noting that this all feels so pointless. So yeah, the Ghost crew after getting off Vizago's ship decide to split up. And you guessed it, Ezra, Sabine and Chopper are the first group, while Zeb, Kanan and Hera go dick around somewhere else. So yeah, they make it over to the Lothal town or wherever, and they decide to go to the establishment of a dude named Old Joe. Because as Ezra says, it's apparently the only place free from the Empire. Upon entering the bar, however, they find out that it's completely occupied by the Empire. They also can't go back outside, because a patrol is looking for anyone suspicious. So Ezra decides to go down and look for a drink. What I found absolutely contrived, and this is something the episode points out as well, is how they've got old photos of Ezra and Sabine on wanted displays everywhere, with the former remarking that he doesn't even look like that anymore. So are we supposed to believe that the Empire haven't got a good snapshot of either two characters since season 1 or whatever? Gee, that makes the Empire look even sloppier. So yeah, Ezra decides to get a drink, and they come across this Imperial pilot dude who I think was in season 1 as a minor character or something. But the point is, he's running the bar now. And when questioned, he happily reports to Ezra that the previous owner was found helping a rebel cell, and he's been captured and executed.
And it's gone.
Very abrupt, I must say. Anyways, we cut to Hera and Kanan avoid an Imperial patrol, and then comes a very inappropriate time to talk about personal shit.
They're just gonna sit around talking about their feelings, fully clothed.
Alright, anyways, we get some misty-eyed shit to remind you that Kanan and Hera are lovers, in which Kanan says that he wishes that he could physically see Hera, and before they can even kiss each other, the comlink goes off. I just love when that happens. Sometimes it stops a corny romance in its tracks at least. You can tell here that they're only having the pair of them talk about their feelings, all because it's nearly the end of the show, and the writers figured it's time. So wrapping up now is pretty much inevitable. Yeah, they weren't really building towards a resolution. It just comes out of nowhere because the show's nearly over, rather than being an overarching subplot. I actually kind of forgot that Hera was Kanan's bitch most of the time. Anyways, cut back to Ezra and Sabine, in which before they're found out by the Imperials, a dude helps pay for their drinks and bails them out. And as it turns out, it's Jai Kell from earlier. Remember him? Yeah, personally I kind of forgot about him. This is yet another instance of making things too easy for the good guys. They're always bailed out of a jam. And since we're in the final season, you'd think they'd start setting up consequences for everything that happens. But no, of course not. Those are saved for the final episodes. It's pathetic. Anyways, apparently Ryder sent Jai Kell to the bar in case Ezra and friends ever showed up. But given they're long overdue, it's not really a valid excuse for him to be there. Anyways, they meet up with the other characters who arrive in a transport, but before they can all get on, the Imperials blast the speeder in a Michael Bay fashion, which by this point I hoped they killed all the characters and ended this godforsaken show, but they all narrowly managed to dodge it, and now they can use their legs. A part I I found absolutely comical is when they encounter a patrol, but they play it cool and the stormtroopers run right past them. No wonder the rebels are so hard to catch. If the Empire can't even be bothered identifying all of them, why even have an Imperial patrol show up if there isn't going to be another fight scene? It's a waste of animation, really. Anyways, they go down a hatch into the sewers, and the Imperials proceed to send probe droids after them, which the rebels gotta take on. Another low tension, low quality fight scene. And then after they evade the probes, Ezra immediately has a give up mentality. After seeing how bad things are on Lothal, he rants about how it's going to be impossible to liberate the world and blah 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 blah. This feels extremely out of place, especially since they've conquered some tough shit already. But as soon as you see Lothal being polluted, suddenly it's unclaimable and the odds are just too high. Now I'm just reminded of how easy it was previously. It was stupid easy to take down stormtroopers. And the Grand Inquisitor died at the end of the first season. And the only thing the rebels lost was Kanan's eyesight, which took a short while to fix. To make a long story short, after walking around the tunnels for a bit, getting lost, they eventually make it to the next hatch where Ryder is there to greet them. Jesus. And this is after being surrounded by stormtroopers on both sides. Anyways, they're taken to the rebel camp. Ryder is surprised to learn that Ezra and friends are literally all the reinforcements they're getting. And then Ezra makes a little speech about how this is how all rebellions start. Small. And that it's a few people standing together. Gee. I could recall only less than 5 minutes ago, you were talking about how impossible this was. Does consistency mean nothing to Filoni? Oh, of course not. This guy would retcon his mother if it meant making the next shitty show. We basically get a tease that we're going to get a plan to raid the TIE Defender factory. And that's the episode. Now we've only got 9 more. But let me tell you, a cat wouldn't have lasted this long. So let's move on to the next episode. In the episode titled Flight of the Defender, we get those Loth cats brush up against Ezra during the recon mission with Sabine, Zeb, and Ryder. They all observe the upgraded, new and improved TIE Defender. And Sabine suggests getting the TIE Defender's flight data recorder to get perfect intel for the rebels just as they're about to leave. Everyone else is easily convinced to go along, and well, it doesn't end up being a hassle in the slightest. Ezra and Sabine get inside the facility no problem, which you'd expect the site where they're testing the TIE Defender to have higher security, but whatever. Who's willing to bet that genius tactician Grand Admiral Thrawn decided to have it be lightly defended? Wait, did I say Thrawn? Anyways, the Loth cats decide to follow Ezra, and they actually end up being an asset, because 2 stormtroopers are guarding the Defender, but the Loth cats go up to the stormtroopers, attack them, and run off. To which the stormtroopers abandon their post to get some payback. This is basically another Deus Ex Machina, and a case of the villains being incompetent at the same time. I hate this. This also feels like a stealth action video game too. The fact that you can draw enemies away like that willy-nilly through a distraction. Speaking of video games, we also get that video game trope where you've got to defend an ally as they're doing something. In this case, Sabine getting in the TIE Defender and telling Ezra as an Imperial shuttle shows up. And hey, speaking of Thrawn, he shows up, along with Governor Price, and as you might have guessed, he's here to inspect the upgraded TIE Defender. Ezra tells Sabine that she's gotta hurry up, and when Sabine tells him to stall them, he proceeds to notice a Loth wolf staring at him. Keep this in mind for later. Given he was distracted, a TIE fighter pilot blasts at him out of nowhere, and to be fair, the TIE pilot didn't give Ezra any time to react. He just blasted at him right away. He might be the candidate for the most competent nameless bad guy in the whole show, and at this rate, he deserves a Disney Plus show far more than Blandor or a Super Soaker. Anyways, as soon as Sabine's done, she sees the commotion going outside and decides to fly the TIE Defender and waste everyone there except Ezra. Just one problem. She doesn't try to take down Thrawn or Price early when she has the chance.
A lost opportunity.
Oh my god. I hate this show for its ungodly amount of plot armor. So, Sabine blasts everyone surrounding Ezra before he jumps on. And then she goes for an attack run and oh! Now you're gonna try and blast Thrawn out of existence. Well, needless to say, she fails at this simple task pretty much, as Thrawn and Governor Pryce get out without a scratch.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Believe me, if it were me piloting the TIE Defender, I would have made sure Thrawn and his pals were dead before I ever flew away from the place. And on Thrawn's side, he doesn't even duck or take cover, which if anything, increased his chances of death. You're lucky Sabine was such a bad shot, and didn't decide to come back for another attack run. So after the commercial break, we see that those two stormtroopers from earlier who abandoned their post actually survived Sabine's TIE Defender massacre because they were actually chasing the Loth Cats, even if it meant running several miles outside the base. We get a lackluster chase dogfighting sequence with Ezra and Sabine in the TIE Defender because Thrawn decided not to activate the kill switch right away. So he sends 3 TIE interceptors to go after the pair. Let's just assume those 3 were the only ones available. He pretty much watches on and lets the TIE interceptor pilots get killed for the combat demonstration.
Wow, what an asshole.
I seriously do not understand why he couldn't just activate the kill switch and get it over with. Having a combat demonstration of the TIE Defender is such a dumb reason to keep the ship operational. Also, he specifically activates the kill switch after Sabine deactivates the transponder. Ugh. So basically, Sabine and Ezra crash between a pile of pointy Lothal rocks. Alright. At this rate, Thrawn is never going to crush the rebels if he keeps being a tactical non-genius. Let's get Thrawn demoted for a minute and come up with a new strategy as Grand Admiral JJ. First, activate the kill switch immediately, then as soon as they crash land, send all Imperial fighters in the area after them and blast them until they're dead. Then when Ezra and Sabine are gone, you've only got Zeb, Hera and Kanan to worry about from the Ghost Crew. Yeah, I know, I'm not gonna win any awards for my strategy, but it's much better than what Micromind came up with. I guess I also have to question why the kill switch didn't make the ship self-destruct, but maybe the idea was that if it merely crashed, it could be retrieved and repaired. Who the hell knows? But I doubt Filoni actually thought about it that far. So yeah, another happy landing. As Sabine and Ezra get out, they've entered Snowland. Don't worry though, the colder temperature isn't a factor in the slightest. There's no case of the pair shivering, so I don't even understand what the point was. They carry the hyperdrive out of the TIE Defender, in which Ezra, guided by the Loth Cat, decides to hide it in a small cave or whatever. To emphasize how slow the Empire is, they happen to find the crash site at night time, which is ridiculous. Wouldn't they have the exact location of where the TIE Defender crashed? Well, actually no, because Thrawn decided to activate the kill switch after the transponder was deactivated. Fucking idiot. And again, why did it take until nighttime to find it? Was there some sort of delay with gathering a search party or something? Of course, the reason this is the case is so Ezra and Sabine can have a few hours head start to hide. What a surprise. Making things extremely easy for the good guys. Anyways, the Imperials don't manage to find the good guys anyways, because Ezra spots a Loth Wolf again, which shows up behind Sabine magically, and breathes on Sabine to sleep. Ezra then realizes he's supposed to get on the back of the Loth Wolf, so he and the unconscious Sabine go for a ride, and basically a few hours later, the rest of the Ghost Crew show up to help near the campsite, but none of them see the Loth Wolf. And the only one who seems to believe Ezra is, surprise, surprise, Kanan. And that's episode 6. Absolutely underwhelming, but I'm not surprised. This is like the endgame stage of the show, and they are struggling to build towards the climax. Anyways, let's move on to episode 7. And if you remember the show, you know this is where they reintroduce another expanded universe legacy character, and absolutely butcher him. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The episode starts with Kanan speaking to Hera about how they seem to always be drawn back to Lothal. even before they recruited Ezra. I don't really have much to say here, because I always thought it was ridiculous that Lothal seemed to be like the central planet. I keep pointing out how the Clone Wars always took us to different places, even if they did do a piss poor job of mapping out the war and having everything tie together. The thing is that Rebels is supposed to be the sequel series, so why the hell couldn't they have some consistency? Anyways, we cut to the crash site, which has been secured by the Imperials, as Governor Price tells Thrawn that the data recorder and the hyperdrive are missing, to which Thrawn responds that he's going to send his personal agent to finish the rebels off. Wow, we all know this agent is going to fail to do a dent on the rebels physically or emotionally, so I just had a blank expression during all this. Who's the villain of the week going to be this time? Anyways, cut to Ezra, Zeb and Jai Kell trying to find the hidden hyperdrive, and they easily find it via Lothcat. It's worth noting here that both Ezra and Jai Kell both have Imperial uniforms, which they acquired off-screen, which I find to be kinda convenient. The disguises doesn't even help them one bit in this episode, so they might as well have done all of this in their basic attire. Anyhow, Thrawn's agent lands near the crash site, and getting the first glimpse of him, I'm like,
what is that?
Yeah, this is supposed to be Rook. Yes, that Rook from the Thrawn trilogy, Thrawn's bodyguard, who ended up dealing the final blow on the Grand Admiral in a dramatic fashion. It was so artistically done. Yeah, his Disney counterpart is pretty much the cookie cutter downgrade nobody asked for. They completely changed how the Nogri look like for one thing. I mean, look at these two. Do they look similar? No! The only thing they got right was the shade of colour. Who designed Rook in this show? I'd like to have a word with whoever the concept artist was. Also, as you might expect, Rook in this show is given no backstory, aside from being Thrawn's bodyguard. If that. In the Thrawn trilogy, the Nogri as a people were vital in the story of the Thrawn trilogy, as Leia aims to sway the Nogri away from the service of the Empire, and the main motivation of Rook stabbing Thrawn in the back literally was because of all this. Thrawn's one oversight cost him his life. If you've never read the Thrawn trilogy, this is probably surprising for you to hear. To learn that this cardboard cutout has nowhere near the amount of depth that he should have. Instead, he's the bad guy of the week. Rook was name dropped earlier in season 3, but that was little more than an Easter egg, because we all know how much Filoni loves to taunt us. Anyways, his introduction in the show tells us that Filoni really skimmed over the source material, as we can see that Rook can smell Zeb from a mile away. Now, the Nogri in the source material have an incredible sense of smell too. In fact, you might recall that Kabarak could detect that Leia was the daughter of Darth Vader. But let me tell you that this is pretty much the only thing they adapted accurately from the source material, because otherwise, Rook is a subservient henchman to Grand Admiral Thrawn. The fact that he sniffs around so much, it's almost like he's a dog trained for sniffing out drugs. Like, that's how little I think of Rook's Disney counterpart. Let me say firsthand that Rook has a completely out-of-place voice for his character model. And I'm not just saying that because in the Thrawn trilogy audiobooks he sounded more like a lizard person. Yeah, not even the fact that this guy voiced Rook in Rebels was enough to give a convincing character. So point is, Rook smells Zeb the Lasat and starts running towards his location. Jai Kell spots him approaching, and both he and Ezra fail to pass off as stormtroopers, and so Rook attacks the pair of them. As you might expect, Rook manages to be like a medium difficulty boss fight at best, but he's still easily defeatable, especially by someone like Ezra. Like, Rook manages to get a few hits on Ezra, but is unable to attack Jai Kell due to Ezra using the Force. Rook does manage to attract the rest of the Imperial forces who back him up, but they might as well not even be there, since the pair bolt in a speeder, while Rook goes after them. He orders everyone else to find Zeb, who is still in the area, although they do a piss poor job of finding him. And Zeb actually manages to take control of the troop transport and drive away, so we get a lackluster chase scene between the pair of rebels. And Rook backed up by 2 Imperial scout walkers. As you might expect, the scout troopers are easily taken out, while Rook is the only one who can evade all their tricks. Actually, just kidding. The pair managed to get away, and Rook ends up looking like an incompetent buffoon. Now, Rook in the source material was mostly present around Grand Admiral Thrawn, and didn't see much direct combat, but he was still efficient. Remember that scene where Thrawn was deciding whose fault it is that Luke Skywalker got away? In Heir to the Empire, as soon as Thrawn carried out the order, Rook killed the one at fault in less than a second. Swift and quick. Anyone can make an error, but the error does not become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. Jesus, these quotes could apply a lot to Star Wars Rebels. Whether it be from the perspective of the writers making countless errors they fail to correct, or whatever. Anyways, we cut to Hera and Kanan getting all misty-eyed again, and they're about to kiss each other, but then they're interrupted by Ryder. And this is the second time this happened. How comical. Anyways, they almost blast Zeb because apparently he forgot to mention that he stole the troop transport. Ugh. Then Ezra and Jai Kell show up and inform Kanan about Rook. Now I should have mentioned this earlier, but Rook actually got a tracker on the speeder. Does this excuse his incompetence? I guess, maybe. Although they did a terrible job at acting like they were doomed. I also really hate that the best the Empire can do is track the rebels to wherever they go. And they can never do a dent even with that advantage. So the Empire show up shortly after the TIE Defender hyperdrive is installed to a ship, with the intent of taking it back to Rebel Command. And as you might expect, instead of sending numerous TIE bombers and making sure the rebels are obliterated, they instead only send ground forces, which of course ensures the rebels have a chance to escape. This is literally the definition of insanity, trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You gotta love that the Empire's only solution to a problem is just throwing stormtroopers at it and hoping that it'll go away eventually. And when the problem multiplies, instead of tactical innovation, they just do the same thing that was shown to fail over and over again, and this is pretty much how pathetic the Empire is in this show. Seriously, I'd say where's Grand Admiral Thrawn when you need him? But his inferior Disney counterpart is literally the best the Empire has, and that's not good enough. To be fair, however, Thrawn decided to go on a holiday because he's not present at Lothal. It's just that classic trick of the writers thinking that if Thrawn isn't directly involved, then none of the blame for what goes wrong falls on him. But unfortunately, it doesn't fucking work that way. It seems kinda lazy that Thrawn is rarely there to directly face the rebels head on. You have to wonder if he's been assigned to taking out the rebels, then what the hell else could be so important that it takes his attention away? Maybe it has something to do with the Chiss ascendancy via the books, but who the hell fucking knows? And besides, Filoni's the kind of guy who ignores the books, even if it's from the books who was written by the guy who created Thrawn in the first place, the character he chose to poorly imitate. Anyways, we also see Rook and Price having an argument about whose fault it is that the rebels got away. This show's got some very weak villains, don't they? Then we cut to Jai Kell preparing to get away in a speeder. I have to ask how much time has passed, because that's a lot of supplies being loaded onto this transport, despite the fact that less than a minute ago, the Empire was approaching from a short while away. So that's a terrible sense of timing on the writer's behalf. Then for some reason, Hera finally decides to kiss Kanan. And it's poorly timed, since, you know, the Empire's about to try and kill them. But then again, it seems like the Imperial transports are slow as fuck, so who the hell knows? So Hera takes off into orbit, while everyone else holds off Imperial forces. Then Ezra sees a Lothwolf, which Ryder also manages to see, so I have no idea what the point of them being visible only to Ezra was, and they decide that's their escape route. We get more of Rook and Price arguing on what to do, and Price assumes control of the hunt, calling in air support. Which, if she could do that the whole time, it makes you wonder why she couldn't do that earlier. Meanwhile, Hera easily manages to escape through hyperspace, and Thrawn just gives off that passive stare he always does. Considering the fact that he didn't do anything, it's like he wants the rebels to win. This is so lazy. At least have Thrawn order Imperial forces to do something, so the group down on the surface follow the Loth Wolves, while the TIE bombers try to snuff them out. And the group are led into a cave full of cave paintings to give a mystery vibe. Then to show that the writers were on drugs, the Loth Wolves lead the group into a literal portal, and they wake up in the middle of nowhere. And upon Sabine looking at her GPS, she informs everyone that once they were in the Northern Hemisphere, but now they're in the Southern Hemisphere down under. Oh, you knew I was going to make that joke as an Australian. It's annoying when other people say that Australia is upside down and they make a big deal out of it. But anyways, that's what happens. They end up down on Lothal's southern hemisphere, and Ezra and Kanan seem to realize that the TIE Defender isn't the only thing the Empire is doing on Lothal. They must be doing something more sinister in order for the Loth Wolves to help them so much. Ugh. We all know where this is leading up to. Point is, we see that Hera made it to Yavin 4 to deliver the intel. And that's the episode. I'm nearly at the halfway point, and I don't want to talk about this show anymore, but since I know the final rant will be worth it, I'm going to continue. So in the next episode, despite the fact that the group ended up in the Southern Hemisphere, a bunch of the other Lothal rebels, including Jai Kell, managed to make it. First thing I have to wonder is how much time has passed. Even if Lothal is on the smaller side of habitable planets, I imagine it would still take a while for Jai Kell and the other rebels to make it to the group's location. To put it into this perspective, it would take days for a car in the real world to make it from Canada to Argentina, and there'd be a bunch of roadblocks and delays along the way. Are we supposed to believe that the rebels managed to make it all the way here? Maybe I'm just overthinking it, and maybe this episode takes place a few days later, but if the latter is the case, then the sense of urgency is weakened because it seems like the rebellion can take its time and attack the Empire whenever it feels like it. Any losses the Empire made, they've probably resupplied and recovered by now. Isn't a key point in defeating your enemy to never give them any space to breathe? Anyways, the rebels conveniently find a solution to contacting Hera, via the fact that they come across an Imperial mining transport. Why the fuck would they care about a mining transport? Well, apparently there's a long-range communication sensor on top, and it's probably strong enough to reach Hera. Yeah, the fact that a mining transport would have that is ridiculous. What would they need a communication sensor that powerful for? It's a mining transport for mining. So after a pointless scene of Rebel Command rejecting Hera's request for a full-scale attack, we see that for the rebels on Lothal, attacking the mining transport is easy as cake. They easily overpower the lone captain, but he sends out an emergency warning on his wrist, and so we get yet another scene of Ezra pretending to be someone else. And we get some whammy unfunny comedy, where the captain restrained by Zeb yelling out that he doesn't sound like that. Ezra fails to draw away security, and they're coming to go investigate. Meanwhile, Kanan and Zeb investigate a disturbance elsewhere on the transport, only to find out that it's just a bunch of slaves. Among the slaves is Vizago. Oh yeah, I sort of forgot about him. Vizago is over the moon, as he presumes the rebels specifically went out of their way to save him. And then the foreman shows up, aka the guy who was ensuring all the slaves were working, and in a surprising turn of events, he manages to defeat Kanan easily, and now it's up to Zeb to defeat him. Wow, what a way to completely neglect what Atten said about taking down a Jedi.
People say killing Jedi is hard. It's not. You just have to be smart about it. No blasters, no getting close to them, no attacking them directly when you can gun down their allies instead. There's ways of gassing them, drugging them, making them lose control, torturing them. I was really good at it.
Like seriously, give that foreman a medal for one of the only nameless characters who could stand toe-to-toe with a Jedi. In fact, Zeb actually has trouble taking him out too. The foreman uses his slaver's whip like Indiana Jones, and what do you know? When listening to the score during the scene, it sounded sort of like the music that played during the Pat Roach fight from Raiders, just less dramatic. The foreman does a good job, and he only narrowly loses, and this is what I wish the fight scenes were more like. So all in all, it's a pretty good fight scene that doesn't make the bad guys, in this case the Mining Guild, look like complete ass clowns. We get another scene of Hera trying to convince the rebels to launch an attack, and this time it ends ambiguously. And then cutting back to the rebels, we get an Imperial inspection crew show up, and Vizago posing as the Mining Guild captain, and Zeb pretending to be a slave guild master. It's kinda lucky that none of the stormtroopers recognize Zeb as a Lasat, and it's also extremely lucky that the actual Mining Guild captain escaped through the vents when the Empire goes to check the storage room out. The Empire is easily fooled and they leave, but since the Lizard captain escaped, they've gotta stop him. One question I have to ask is, why the hell didn't you just kill him? This is just like the Senator Travis crap all over again. Since the rebels chose not to kill him, they spun a story as him being a peaceful protester and the Ghost crew being the violent ones, which was obviously gonna happen for Christ's sake. So since that's the case, Ezra has to climb through the vents to catch him. And after some scuffling around, the captain's dead, and Ezra takes back control of the mining transport. Then they wrap up the episode by recruiting more rebels out of the slaves and managing to contact Hera, who confirms the rebel attack is happening. Ships and bombers being loaded up and everything. With that is episode 8. Now that we've officially passed the halfway point, let's see what crap the show has left for us. So in episode 9, the rebel attack force shows up, and initially it's a tough time. Thrawn's only strategy is to send swarms of TIE fighters against the rebels. Gee, what a crazy original clever strategy, dude. This guy is fucking useless. Anyways, we see the rebels down at the surface set charges to all the anti-aircraft turrets, and upon their destruction, Price warns Thrawn about the vulnerability of the factory and the fuel depot, given they are the rebels' main targets. Thrawn then confidently assures Price that the factory is safe, because none of the rebel ships will make it past the blockade. Although, as you're able to see, Thrawn is going to eat those words hard. So, aside from 2 X-Wing pilot casualties, Hera manages to outmaneuver the TIE Defender Elite pilot by flying close to one of the Star Destroyers, resulting in both of the ship's shields being deactivated. And since both shields are taken out, it's up to the better pilot to get the first strike, and that ends up being Hera, unsurprisingly. And so the TIE Defender pilot dies horribly.
And it's gone.
So yeah, Thrawn ends up being proven wrong. The rebels did manage to get past the blockade. However, they still try to make Thrawn look like a tough, smart guy, with him remarking calmly that the failure was regrettable, but, quote, a testament to Captain Syndulla's skills as a pilot. So then he sends in the second attack force, and apparently, the second attack force is enough to completely overwhelm the rebels, as Ezra and friends look on from the surface. This is so goddamn stupid, as well as being an incredibly tough pill to swallow. So basically the initial wave failed, but then all that Thrawn had to do was send in another force, and that apparently succeeded. They don't even show us what happened exactly. I guess since that would just be too much to animate and present for a 20-minute episode, which to me screams laziness and that they just took the easy way out, and also to progress the plot. Even if you could say that Thrawn technically succeeded in the end, the matter of the fact is that Thrawn lost yet the second TIE Defender Elite and the skilled pilot that came with it. Now I imagine they're gonna have to design yet another prototype. So even though Thrawn did succeed through contrived means, it wasn't flawless. So basically, to summarize what happened, a handful of pilots, including Hera, survived the crash landing. Some sympathetic civilians guided her away from the crash site, and Kanan meanwhile makes it his mission to go back for her. We see that Thrawn orders Rook to hunt down all the rebel pilots and bring them in alive. He manages to capture one of the alien pilots before he heads straight for Hera, who manages to get her bearings and save Mart Matin. Remember him? She saves him from being captured since she easily hijacks a troop transport, but then of course, Rook shows up, and using his Honaga ninja warrior skills, dodges all the blaster shots, as Hera tells Martin Chopper to run. Rook catches up to them, and he and Hera do some kung fu on each other, and Chopper only helps at the last minute. Jesus Christ, what artificial tension. But Rook ultimately gets away. I'd say he's one useless villain, but you already know that. After this, Kanan is surrounded by the Loth Wolves when he's riding back to save Hera. and so he has to go where they want for a little while. After that, Mart and Hera make it to the hatch, only to find out that it's guarded by 2 stormtroopers and a walker. Although Mart is easily able to lure it away, and shenanigans happen where Hera is able to trip it over with a speeder. However, Imperial forces close in, and Mart and Chopper are ordered by Hera to leave her behind, as Imperials surround her from all angles, and Rook finally does his job. But not really, since he needed backup to overwhelm Hera pretty much. Governor Price shows up and stun shots her. And yeah, she's captured at last. However, Thrawn wanted live prisoners, so you know that Hera is predictably gonna be rescued. Mart and Chopper meet up with Kanan by another hatch, and they proceed to leave the area. Kanan understanding Hera's sacrifice or whatever. And that's the episode. The only compliment I'll give is that at least they haven't wasted our time for several episodes in a row. However low the tension might be, the episodes do feel eventful. And oh boy, the next certainly does. But that doesn't mean it's any good. So basically episode 10 starts with Kanan telling Ezra that he has to come up with a plan to save Hera, because he'll be too distracted by how he feels about her to think clearly. Kanan must have a shitload of confidence in Ezra to trust him enough with the plan to save Hera. Do I think it's earned? Not really. Need I remind you that Ezra's not even 18 yet? And he ain't exactly a tactician. I think it's ridiculous that Ezra can lead an attack with him coming up with the plan, but that's the direction the episode's going to go, and so that's what we're forced to watch. We then cut to Hera being tortured by Governor Price, who is doing it completely for fun, as she tells Thrawn when he comes in that she hasn't even asked any questions yet. Thrawn proceeds to taunt Hera, bringing the Calicori, and talking to her about the fact that apparently she has a long-dead brother, who died quite young. Gee, we're only learning about this now, when we've only got 5 episodes of the show left to go? Really feels like they're throwing something in at the last minute. I don't know why Hera's brother was never mentioned before, but I guess I don't give a shit, since it's thrown in information that is utterly pointless. Another thing, I mentioned how Rook managed to capture one of the rebel pilots, whom Price ordered to bring in for interrogation. Well, here's the funny thing. That character is never ever seen or mentioned again. Yeah, just like the Conquered Dawn episode, the focus is entirely on Hera, indicating that the pilot who was captured was left behind. And given what happens later, the pilot likely died and was pretty much forgotten about. So the fact that they forgot about a random side character doesn't surprise me. Yet they introduced the side character, and the fact that the previous episode is their one and only appearance shows us that Filoni and the writers had such poor attention to detail. Anyways, let's get on with it. Ezra senses where Hera is while she's being tortured, and that's where Ezra has the extremely stupid plan of using gliders to swoop across Capital City and enter the Imperial base without triggering the auto turrets or alarms or anything like that. But they've got to make their own gliders, so they go back to their mountain base, which, speaking of, where is the geography of all this shit? I remember when they were in the Northern Hemisphere, then the South, and they're apparently close to Capital City, and it makes everything confusing. Meanwhile, Kanan decides to cut his hair and shave his beard. Now that he's got his makeover, he's more than ready to rescue Hera. Although based on the somber music they play, it's a dead giveaway that someone's gonna die. Yeah, they make it way too obvious based on how they structured this episode. Kanan giving himself a makeover wasn't just to sell new appearance action figures. Anyways, Ezra, Sabine and Kanan get on their gliders and proceed to fly in the sky like an eagle towards Capital City. I have no idea if this shit obeys the laws of physics, but it probably doesn't matter. Anyways, Tarkin tells Thrawn through a hologram that Director Krennic's project is going to get more funding, and that he made a better case for why over the TIE Defenders. And basically, this is a convenient excuse for Thrawn to leave Coruscant. Again, this is part of the delusional logic the writers have, that any of the failures the Imperials have without him won't fall on him, and that's just stupid. You can also tell via this cue that the Imperials are about to be defeated big time, so the gliders manage to make it to the Imperial Dome, and the three of them split up, with Ezra and Sabine going one way and Kanan going another, using magnetic climbing equipment that suddenly exists. Okay, let's just forget about it, or we'll be here all day. Kanan basically climbs down 6 floors to rescue Hera, while Hera's still being tortured. After being tortured again, she's given a needle with some truth serum, and asked by Governor Pryce where the rebel base is, and in her drugged up state, she remarks that Kanan's here. We get Rook coming in to speak with Pryce, and so she leaves, trusting 2 stormtroopers to guard her. Kanan proceeds to throw both stormtroopers out to their deaths, and personally frees her. She tells Kanan in her drugged up state that she hates his haircut, and Kanan gives her the Kalikori he retrieved earlier, and so he proceeds to climb up with Hera on his back. They proceed to deflect Rook and some Imperials before they glide off, deliberately towards the fuel depot. And you gotta love how elaborately planned this feels. And basically while Sabine and Ezra grab the escape ship, Hera and Kanan talk about their feelings,
fully clothed,
and basically start smooching each other. And you can tell this is where Kanan's gonna die if it wasn't obvious already. I mean, he shaved his hair, the rescue is played like a goodbye, and they're on the top of the fuel depot at the end, which is presumably very flammable. So yeah, they kiss for the second time, which given they already did that earlier, its effect is sort of worn out and isn't as effective as it could be. Anyways, they're all about to be picked up when Pryce sees them on the fuel depot, and orders those under her to fire at the depot. Yeah, so when the Empire's got a free shot, it's not without a price to pay. Funny how the character is literally named Arinda Pryce. Anyways, we get this hammed-in dramatic moment where Kanan runs in to contain the blast, and pushes his allies back to save their lives, right until the flames blast through him.
And it's gone!
To the scene's credit, they do try to make it as effective on screen as they could, but not only was this blatantly predictable, it's completely unearned. Kanan dies because it's literally the end of the show, and somebody's gotta go for all that emotion. My dick didn't even move once. I love how realistically, Governor Pryce was literally committing suicide, given how close she and her peers were to the fuel depot. But she manages to survive somehow, even when we see that the blast from the explosion went past the AT-AT she was in. So I don't know how she's still alive come the next episode. Kanan's death felt too staged and phoned in, and needless to say, he isn't missed much past this point. Okay, the characters miss him a lot, but I sure the fuck don't. So anyways, episode 11 focuses on the aftermath of Kanan's death. Governor Pryce, who is somehow still alive, inspects the area and gets confirmation that Kanan Jarrus perished in the explosion. Pryce's reaction is one of restrained excitement, and she sees it as an achievement. Yeah, congrats. You took out one rebel, but managed to destroy your own fuel depot in the process. Yeah, so there's far more consequences for the Empire than there is for the rebels, logistic-wise. Oh, I'm sure Kanan's death will lower morale quite a bit, but he's a martyr at the very least. Whereas the Empire lost their fuel refinery, which has huge consequences, and Pryce knows it. So her plan is to set up a celebration parade at their quote victory, even though they've suffered more than the rebels have. We all know that eventually, she'll have to suck up to Thrawn over her lethal failure that cost the Empire dearly. So this isn't even like a real victory for the Empire. And in fact, this ends up backfiring in the long run. Zeb and Chopper, who were absent from all this, find out the hard way that Kanan is nothing more than Michael Bay confetti now. Upon returning to the mountain, the crew hear over the radio that the Empire's talking shit about the rebels, and how there's going to be a celebration that all citizens are required to attend. Sabine and Zeb decide to use their frustration to, quote, add some fireworks to the parade, while Hera goes to sulk somewhere else, and Ezra goes outside to talk to Kanan posthumously, wondering what the hell he's supposed to do now. That's all before the Loth Wolves show up and aggressively start chasing Ezra. Meanwhile, Governor Price tries to hide the fact that the fuel depot is no more, but Thrawn obviously sees through her deception, which isn't rocket science. I think anyone would have found out eventually that the fuel depot was blown up. So yeah, Thrawn berates Price for her failure, and despite the fact that Rook is in the same room as her, Thrawn merely states that he'll deal with her when he comes back. I don't know why he let her live, given the fact that I imagine Price might try to rectify the mistake to save her own skin and waste even more resources. So why not get rid of her now? Unironically, the fact that she screwed up this much, down to the point of it being negligence, makes the villain kills his own men cliche in this instance completely understandable. Like, come on. You know that Price was reckless enough to destroy the fuel depot. She can make another fatal mistake like that again, even before you return. You know what? Whatever. Let's just get on with it. So yeah, each of the rebels are doing their own separate thing. On Ezra's side, he communicates with all the Loth wolves, who reveal to him that he's got to go back to the Jedi Temple on Lothal, and they give him a stone tablet that indicates what he's supposed to do. As well as this, Hera, as mentioned before, is sulking, and talks to Chopper about how heroic and brave and wise Kanan was, and all that shit. And the most eventful of the lot is Zeb and Sabine, who scout out Capital City before proceeding to go to the main road, attacking a scout trooper, and they somehow manage to slice into Imperial communications through a speeder, in which they find out that the fuel depot crippled everything. So Price was trying to hide the fact that the rebels really wounded them. Yeah, so basically they bolt from the area, and when they realize Rook is chasing after them, they lure him away and do a little fist fight with him, but unsurprisingly, despite using some cloaking tech, which I didn't know existed outside of the video games, but whatever, they take down Rook. And Sabine gets Zeb to restrain his punches, in which she spray paints Rook to look like a clown, and sends him back to the Imperials. Okay, so that's another case of not finishing off your enemies. A blaster to the head would have done it, but of course you not only have him live, but you also send him back to the Empire. You could at least hold him as a prisoner if you don't have the guts, or you believe in Jedi values or whatever. All three subplots I just mentioned lead to the good guys being in high spirits again, where they all realize what they're supposed to do next, and that Kanan didn't sacrifice himself for nothing. Ezra brings that stone tablet to everyone, and yeah, that's the episode. I think I may have been overgeneralizing the episode, but to be honest, it's sort of like a setup episode. You know, with teasing everything that'll happen in a future episode. It's not quite filler, but it's still a waste of time if that makes sense. So let's move on to episode 12. After we finish this episode, we're in the home stretch of the finale episodes, and I'm so excited to be done with this crap. So basically this episode starts with the Ghost Crew talking about a stone tablet that Ezra brought with him, and how it comes from the Jedi Temple, and they should probably see what the Empire is up to there. They reference how the temple is up north, and that they don't have a ship. Guys, what about the Imperial dropship you guys came back in? What happened to that? I also have to wonder how the other rebels like Jai Kel got here, if it's not that easy to get here from the north. Both are completely unexplained, because it's a lack of attention to detail. And believe me, by now, it all adds up. Anyhow, Ezra got an easy solution to get up north. He basically summons the Loth wolves with the Force, and they all invite Ezra and friends to get on their backs to be ridden like horses. You know, I remember I used to have a golden retriever when I was like 6 years old, and I tried sitting on its back so I could ride it like Indiana Jones. And I pretty much overestimated how strong the dog's back was. Seriously, I can't be the only one who tried riding their dog like a horse when we were all kids. Why do I bring this up? I don't know. I guess I was reminded of that memory when I was a kid. So basically Ezra and friends ride the wolves, with the one Zeb riding having Chopper in its mouth. They all hyperspace teleport whatever when they ride long enough, and make it all the way up to the Northern Hemisphere again, to which they proceed to hike to the Jedi Temple. Except when they get there, it's now an Imperial excavation site. The Imperials have been digging all around, presumably in an attempt to get inside. And so to investigate, they easily snag off 2 scout trooper uniforms via projecting a hologram of Thrawn. And so Sabine and Ezra redress themselves and use their disguises as an excuse to get in. We see that the guy in charge is a dude named Minister Hayden, who calls Ezra and Sabine off when they touch some of the uncovered artifacts. The Death Trooper is then mind-tricked to forget about the incident after the Minister leaves to contact Coruscant. This is where we get some more background on what's going on, as Chopper gets the signal on the transmission from Lothal to Coruscant, which it seems like it was piss easy to hijack, and they listen to the Minister talking to the Emperor. They talk about how they've got to gain entrance to the temple, and they name drop the Mortis gods. Alright, those dickheads who ambiguously exist. The discussion is brief, but the Minister is confident that it's only a matter of time before they're in. That's where the Ghost Crew talk amongst each other on what to do next. And that's where the disguised pair convince Hera to proceed with seeing what the Empire's looking for. That's where we see the Minister order all Imperial forces to surround one of the walls. And upon turning the floodlights on, we see a carved painting of the Mortis gods or whatever. Then I saw the hand movements of the Mortis gods and I realized, oh, they're gonna twist and turn it like a puzzle in a video game. And yeah, they figure out that little puzzle in mere moments. For some reason, they're doing a terrible job at keeping their cover, and Sabine has to distract 2 stormtroopers who confront her. All the while Ezra is just trying to figure out how to solve the puzzle. He finally figures out what to do, and to be honest, the moving 2D animation that follows is pretty cool and stylish, and it results in Ezra following the moving Loth wolves. Eventually, they run in a loop around to create a pathway. So meanwhile, Sabine is found out, and just when they're about to catch Ezra, he realizes he can jump through the wall, and so he proceeds to do so to escape. No one else goes through, as the 2 stormtroopers who try smack dab in the wall in a comical fashion. And yeah, after all that crappy build up, you know what's coming next. And to be honest, this is probably the most interesting the show actually gets. The rest of it is completely boring, as you might have gathered, but I mean they did the bare minimum here, so yeah. Ezra went through a portal, and that leads us to episode 13, titled A World Between Worlds. And if you can't tell, the sweat on my body just got 10 times worse. So let's talk about it. So basically, we get a bunch of mysterious voices, including Sir Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan, and Ezra finds himself through the portal. The whole thing is trippy, and so he basically goes exploring. We see in the meanwhile, the Minister tries to convince Sabine to assist him with opening up the portal. And apparently, he discusses how the portal is not just a gateway to inside the temple, but apparently a gateway to all time and space. And whoever controls it controls the universe. But as we're about to see, Dave Filoni's about to use this concept for a cheap get-out-of-jail-free card. While Ezra's out exploring the world between worlds, he encounters an owl, and he remarks that the owl was around wherever Ahsoka was. You know, I actually can't remember that. I guess it is a testament to how forgettable this show is. But anyways, the owl comes full circle here, as it stands above what is visibly another portal. And yeah, you knew this was coming. The portal projects to when Ahsoka was fighting Darth Vader back in Season 2. Ezra sees from the opposite angle everything that happened. So yeah, this is what happened after Ezra and Kanan were forced to flee. Ahsoka is about to be defeated by Vader, and that means we're so close to having this bitch who has more than outstayed her welcome drop dead at last as Malachor goes apeshit. And then Ahsoka cuts the ground, and just before Vader manages to finish Ahsoka off with a strike, and this is something I will never, ever forgive Ezra for, but he grabs Ahsoka and pulls her back, bringing her with him into the world between worlds. Yeah, that's right. Filoni just saved Ahsoka with time travel.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
If you know me, you know I'm gonna go to town on this awful writing decision. Time travel is the most ridiculous way to bring Ahsoka back. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if someone joked about Ahsoka coming back through time travel after Season 2 left her fate ambiguous, only for it to be done in reality. Time travel is literally a retarded excuse to bring Ahsoka back. Filoni just wrote himself into a corner. time travel does not belong in Star Wars, because in case you couldn't tell, Star Wars is supposed to be one rigid timeline set in stone with characters making the choices they did. Anakin always became Darth Vader, for example, and there was nothing anybody could do to change it. But good Lord, Filoni brings in this ridiculous concept that there's a world between worlds that gives you full control of space and time. This just makes everything messy. Now, I'd like to mention that the expanded universe actually did do time travel before, but let me point out the difference. In Star Wars Tales issue 13, there was a short story called The Secret of Tet Army, in which Mace Windu goes into an excavation site where he encounters a statue of himself, and upon touching a crystal, is launched back in time, and basically you realize that Mace Windu was fulfilling a time paradox, as he defends the people who made a statue of him in the first place. He is then teleported back after 4 days, and he realizes back on Coruscant that he was pretty much always meant to be there. And that's the end. Now here's the difference between this story and the World Between Worlds. 1, it's completely self-contained and has zero impact on anything else. It's a one-off Mace Windu adventure. 2, they made it crystal fucking clear that Mace Windu could not change the past, but rather play out the actions that ensures the future he came from to begin with. If you're unfamiliar, this time travel theory is known as the predestination paradox, and it's what the original Terminator movie used. How time is one self-sustaining loop of the same thing happening over and over again, with nothing being able to change the past. There's also other time travel theories such as what Avengers Endgame did, which also makes it impossible to change your own past, but unlike the predestination paradox, you can create new timelines that create a new future, but the timeline you come from still exists and cannot be changed. So basically you can live in a new world, but it's impossible to change your own. Then there's something like Back to the Future, which is basically how a lot of people traditionally think of time travel, going back in time and changing things that have a direct effect on the timeline, and even your own existence if you're not careful. There's one reality that can be changed on a whim. Now, it's worth noting that Back to the Future is not 100% logically consistent, and there's a lot of paradoxes and logical mistakes in all 3 movies. But the basic idea of how time travel works in this universe is clear. Now back to the World Between Worlds. The problem here is that they make it unclear what time travel theory they're using for Star Wars Rebels. Now, ignoring the fact that time travel stories fuck with your head anyways, it's made unclear what exactly happened timeline-wise. Did Ahsoka originally die, but was later saved in an alternate timeline when Ezra entered the World Between Worlds? Or was Ahsoka in Disney canon always going to be saved via a predestination paradox? We don't know, and that's what causes the problem. You all know that Ahsoka has long outstayed her welcome anyways, so even if it was confirmed to be a predestination paradox, you know that I would say that it's a shitty excuse for the writers to keep Ahsoka alive, through the fact that she was always going to survive. There's also something I wanted to talk about a bit later. So in the next scene, Sabine lazily refuses to help the minister figure out how to get through the portal, and basically some death troopers force her to comply. The Sabine stuff is completely uninteresting to what we just saw, so there's a problem in contrasting subplots. But anyways, cut back to Ezra and Ahsoka. The two wake up, and basically Ahsoka slowly realizes that she missed everything else that happened in the show after Malachor. Then of course Ezra, after realizing that he literally saved Ahsoka through time travel, realizes that he can do the same with Kanan, and so he excitedly runs off. I should also mention here that Zeb, Hera and Chopper are also infiltrating the dig site meanwhile. So point is, Ezra runs around and Ahsoka tries to dissuade him from saving Kanan because of the butterfly effect, and because Kanan, if he's saved now, won't be there to save the rest of them. You know, assuming that the risk of the butterfly effect is present, and Ezra can change the past if he wants to, then that only further brings Ahsoka's survival into question. I wanted to say firsthand that Ahsoka surviving versus Ahsoka dying means very little if you think about it. I mean, before the Ahsoka show came out, what could Ahsoka's death possibly have on the timeline? She's an afterthought of a shoehorn character after all. She wasn't in any of the films and pretty much did nothing. So let's think about it. If Ahsoka dies, nothing changes. Vader is still yet to be redeemed and the films play out. If Ahsoka lives, then she avoids being in the films because reasons, and they play out anyways. You gotta love how Kanan's survival would create a paradox where it's not there to save Ezra and everyone else, but there isn't with Ahsoka. It could play out either way, and pretty much nothing would change. That actually kind of demonstrates how inconsequential Ahsoka is, and how the saga can play out just fine without her. So congrats, Filoni, you just demonstrated why Ahsoka was even more unnecessary than before. And this was all out of the intention of making her vital to the saga she was never in. I just love it when the writing is just so poorly thought out, and as I indicated, time travel is turning me into a goddamn lunatic with all the confusing paradoxes and logical questions. And of course, to make things incredibly confusing, before they can even think of choosing to butterfly effect Palpatine out of existence for the better, Palpy shows himself through a portal, which brings into question whether Palpatine already has access to the world between worlds or not. He starts bursting lightning or whatever through the portal, and the pair narrowly escape. They pretty much wrap the episode with the other good guys causing chaos for the Imperials, and as soon as Ezra gets out of his own portal, with Ahsoka going out another, they close the portals for good, and ruin everything for the Minister, who does that classic, "No, my plans are ruined" speech you've heard a million times before. This is all before the temple collapses in on itself. Ezra was knocked unconscious upon closing the temple for some reason, and speculating on a reason why is pointless, but when he wakes up, he discovers that the entire dig site no longer exists, and all that remains is like a crest on the ground. Ezra realizes this is exactly where the Jedi Temple used to be. Then they talk about Kanan again, and that's the episode. Yeah, so please forgive me if I didn't explain this episode that thoroughly. But to be honest, I don't even know what Filoni was going for with this crap. Adding time travel into Star Wars is already one way to fuck with your head, so I'm not gonna bother deeply assessing anything else that does not belong in Star Wars. I've already pointed out the elaborate dumbass writing present that served as a gateway for Ahsoka to return after she disappeared for like 2 seasons. Filoni has really gotten carried away with how important he thinks Ahsoka is. He's just making her important by cramming her into everything, and not any organic relevance to the story. He is really pushing our suspension of disbelief. And you know, I had a dream last night as of writing this part of the script. But basically I dreamt that I was in high school, and Dave Filoni came to the school to do a presentation on filmmaking, and I just had contempt for him the whole time. Everyone else was completely oblivious to how much of a hack he was, and I was completely miserable by the time lunch break came. I really seemed to obsess subconsciously over all the corporate hacks who work at Disney Lucasfilm. Luckily, there's only 2 episodes left. Thank fuck. Unfortunately, we're in for some lazy writing all the way. Right off the bat in the semi-finale episode, we see that Hera escaped Lothal off screen, and she even references how the blockade is tougher than ever. But I guess Filoni wants this show to be over even more than I do, so he just skipped over that. Which is, of course, blatantly lazy writing. We see that the characters arranged a meeting on that barren world where Commander Fox and Gregor were hanging out. Basically, all of the allies that you could think of, including Hondo, are all gathered to be recruited. And they emphasize that this mission is not for the rebellion, it's for Ezra. And yeah, this is basically our Avengers Endgame team-up between all these characters the show set up. Or the Clone Wars set up previously. Whatever. Well, I'm glad Hondo was put here. He's like the only good comic relief in the whole show. So maybe this won't be so bad after all. Yeah, that's how the episode starts. Cut back to Ezra meditating, and after receiving a vision, he urgently goes to the Mountain Control Center or whatever it's called, and states they all need to act now due to his vision. What was the vision? Thrawn's coming back to Lothal. In a better written show, that line would have made anyone piss their pants, but since Thrawn has been shown to be defeatable, whether the writers want to admit it or not, I'm far from scared. Cut to Governor Pryce in a panicked state trying to catch the rebels with no success. She says that she'll execute the one under her if he doesn't catch the rebels in a short period of time. And then another Imperial officer comes in and tells her that there's someone trying to contact her with a pre-Imperial frequency or something. When she accepts the call, she gets Ryder. Now, since Ryder was the governor before Pryce, he basically says he's gonna sell out the rebels in exchange for his freedom. You can pretty much tell that this could very much be bait to lure Pryce into a trap, given her desperation to please Thrawn. And the scene isn't really shot in a way where Ryder is selling out his allies willy-nilly. Yeah, I could tell right away that Ryder isn't that kind of character. For some reason though, the other side characters were seemingly not informed of this plan, because as soon as the Empire shows up at the base, they're all surprised and caught off guard. So yeah, we get a battle scene. And I guess they do a decent job jumping through perspectives. Governor Pryce pretty much sends everything she has at them, including Rook. And meanwhile, we see everyone else up in space attach themselves to a cargo ship, which is their way down to the surface. A very iffy plan, but I guess that was the point since it was Hondo's plan. So yeah, Ezra ends up fighting Rook, Sabine takes out all the jet troopers, and so on. Different characters, different specialties. Rook is thrown off twice in this episode, but don't worry, he's A-okay. For now at least. Eventually the Empire overwhelmed the rebels, destroying the mining transport, and at first, it seems that they've been cornered, with Ryder selling them out. But then just at the right time, the Ghost, along with all relevant reinforcements, show up to save the day. So now Pryce and the Imperials are on the defensive. The rebels eventually run into a cave, and upon Pryce ordering Rook to enter the cave, the Imperials get swarmed by the Loth Wolves. I am actually pretty sick of seeing these animals, but to make a long story short, they overwhelm the bad guys, and Governor Pryce is forced to surrender. Rook, as I mentioned before, is thrown off, but don't worry, he'll be back. So yeah, everything that could have gone right for the rebels did go right. And I'm not nervous at all for the good guys, since I know they're all going to probably be fine. It's been like, what, 4 episodes since Kanan died, and nobody else has followed. This did feel like another setup episode, so there wasn't that much to talk about. But finally, we've got the series finale. An episode that is double the length of a regular episode. It's 2 in 1. So hopefully that extended time will be worth something, but probably not. So the final episode is called Family Reunion and Farewell. And in this final episode of the whole series, Ezra talks to his parents posthumously. Something which he hasn't really done until now. But the point is that he basically gives some indirect, inspirational speech to the audience. I guess it's decent, but that's all this show manages to be at best. I guess the editors really did try their hardest to sell the scene, which is not something I can say about everything else in the show. The scene takes itself seriously, with zero quips or jokes, which is honestly the show at its best. So yeah, I was kind of expecting to find something to complain about, but I guess there's nothing so far. So anyways, Governor Pryce is being escorted around as a prisoner, and she decides to talk shit to Agent Callus. She tries to grandstand him for giving up a life of prestige and whatnot, and then Ezra interrupts, smugly stating that they will succeed, and she's gonna help them free Lothal. Of course, Pryce initially refuses, and that's where Ezra summons a Loth Wolf on her, and since she was shown to be completely terrified of those things in the last episode, she immediately complies, as long as Ezra calls off the wolf. So anyways, they fly over to the Imperial Dome in Capital City. Despite pretty much being at the rebels' mercy, she comments on how bad their plan is, all before Callus tells her to call in the landing coordinates. So as soon as they land, that's when Imperial forces learn that they aren't friends, and they all go Psycho Rambo on everyone. As you might expect from a show like this, despite it being the very last episode of the whole series, it's piss easy to make it through Imperial forces. When the communications room is locked down, they have this stupid plan to launch Hondo's pig friend up the viewport of said room, and this unironically works. And it's just something you can't take seriously. Like, come on guys, you can do better than that. But anyways, their plan goes on without a hitch, and they left behind Wolf, Vizago, and Mart to be the pickup. So we cut to those three elsewhere on Lothal, and we see firsthand that Rook survived the whole ordeal. And not only that, but he got away, but flees after a Loth Wolf shows up to defend them. So instead of finding a way to kill it, he just gets in a working troop transport and flies away. At no point does he try to use his troop transport to kill any of the four entities I just mentioned, so that's another case of blatant plot armor. I guess on the upside, he does contact Thrawn and informs him on what happened. So at least Rook isn't completely stupid. What is stupid, however, is despite him warning Thrawn, the rebels are still able to initiate a drill where all the Imperials head straight towards the dome before the rebels blow it up with all of them inside. However, it turns out that he let all of this happen, because since every single Imperial is inside the dome, he can orbitally bombard Lothal however much he likes without any Imperial casualties. This is like the closest time I can tell Thrawn is being clever. But I mean, exploiting a weakness in the rebels' plan still isn't that impressive. Thrawn is still yet to come up with a plan that was all him, and not counteracting a problem the rebels created. Also, just a quick question. If Thrawn destroys the infrastructure of the capital city and kills countless people, then won't he eventually destroy the TIE Defender factory and kill all of the workforce that he could use to make it? Like, I remember how he scorned Price for destroying the fuel supply, but with this, I don't see how he's going to benefit in the long term, even if there are no Imperial casualties. So maybe this counteractment isn't as clever as it originally seems. I guess he did force the rebels to change their strategy, however. So anyways, he starts bombing the city, and Ezra pleads with him to stop, and that he'll surrender unconditionally. For some reason, Ezra only accepts Ezra's surrender instead of the entire rebel force, presumably so everyone else still has a chance to claim victory from a seemingly certain defeat. I really hope I'm not thinking too hard about Thrawn's tactics here, but this is Thrawn we're talking about, so you'd think his tactics would be extra clever. But for some reason, instead of forcing all the rebels to surrender under the threat of planetary bombardment, it's just Ezra who's gotta surrender, which is a major oversight on Thrawn's part. So yeah, with the rebels free to do whatever, while Ezra decides to give himself up to Thrawn, reasons that he'll find a way to take back control of the shields once he's up there. So basically all the remaining rebels plan to storm the shield generator in the dome, and now I'm realizing how stupid Thrawn is. Yeah, so pretty much everyone gets their bearings after that. Thrawn speaks to Ezra about how much the Jedi suck afterwards, and he talks pretty much like he knows he's the bad guy, which seems to be another problem. Either the villains absolutely do not care that they're evil, or they are 100% convinced that they are the hero of their story. When Ezra talks to Thrawn about how he didn't earn Lothal, Thrawn responds with, "It doesn't matter that I didn't earn it, all that matters is who has the power," which is such a self-aware bad guy thing to say. Yeah, I guess that's why the dialogue is so weak when the villains open their mouths. It's like they know they're the bad guys and don't even act to what they think is right. Something that confused me about this version of Thrawn is that his key motivation is to protect his people, right? I even saw that Star Wars Explained made a video like that when it came to the Ahsoka show. And he's the biggest Disney shill who is terrible at explaining plot holes that Disney Star Wars creates. Anyways, the trio at the campsite wake up, with Mart explaining that they've got a new mission, and then cut to Thrawn, who decides to bring Ezra to the Emperor, or at least a hologram of the Emperor. As we can see, they modified the hologram to make the Emperor look like a jolly nice man. He basically speaks politely to Ezra and tries to tempt him by saying that he can have his folks back, by signaling him to come closer next to the piece of the Jedi Temple on Lothal that's stored on the ship. And basically as soon as Ezra approaches, he sees his parents through a portal or something. And what exactly is going on here? Who the hell knows? Is this like a world between worlds portal that can change the past or something? If that's the case, then I'm getting pretty fed up with this time travel bullshit. Then we cut to the rebels split into teams of 2 trying to take the generator room. To sum this part up, Hondo's pig companion gets shot and dies.
And it's gone.
I actually smiled at that unironically. Alright. 1 rebel down, presumably a dozen more to go. Zeb decides to attract attention away by doing an RKO on Rook, which gives Callus and Gregor the space to take out a bunch of the distracted Imperials. However, one of them manages to survive and gets a lucky shot on Gregor, managing to hit him in the chest. Before we get to find out what happens to him, we cut back to Ezra, who basically gets the final choice. And he decides to let his parents go, and basically destroys the gateway or whatever, which causes the whole temple thing to collapse. And the Emperor, half revealed by his true form, is pissed. In regards to Ezra's parents, since they can't be brought back at all now, I have this to say.
And it's gone.
So yeah, as soon as Ezra somehow manages to outwill the Emperor, he sends like 3 Imperial Royal Guards after him. Assuming these guards are as skilled as the ones in Crimson Empire, Ezra doesn't stand a chance. Especially since the guards have some special force pike sucky thingies. As well as that, 3 stormtroopers proceed to fire at him, but they miss even though he's a stationary target. And he manages to use the force to pummel the Imperials with the rubble from the now collapsed portable temple. Gee, making it too easy for the good guys, are you, show? You know this is why I hate your guts. You don't take risks, you don't create tension, and you don't earn anything. So yeah, Ezra's got a completed arc. Or nearly a completed arc, however weak it was. Okay, back on the surface, the rebels managed to reactivate the shield generator before Thrawn can bombard the city again. When Thrawn realizes he can't do a dent on the city now, he contacts Rook, but the only one who responds is Zeb, who taunts him that Rook isn't available so he can leave his message after the beep. Yeah, it was shown previously that Zeb managed to escape from the power beam powering up the generator, but Rook didn't.
And it's gone.
Yeah, that's right. Rook's dead. So if Thrawn's gonna die later down the line, who the hell knows who's gonna kill him this time? Keep in mind that they still haven't introduced Mara Jade, or Jorah Sabaoth, or Talon Card, or anyone else introduced in the Thrawn trilogy. But now one of them that was introduced is now dead. This is why we're definitely not going to get a faithful adaptation of Heir to the Empire, adapted straight from the book. It'll be a bastardized spiritual successor, if you could even call it spiritual, that will absolutely miss the point of the source material. I think a lot of people were surprised to see Rook go, because they did him dirty. I know Rook wasn't the most important character in the Thrawn trilogy, but he still did one important thing, and he tied into the subplot into the Nogri people, which guess what? We still haven't gotten the devastation of Hanukkah during the Clone Wars. Yeah, that's something phony Filoni forgot to show. But hey, if you want to see it for real, check out Star Wars Republic. That's where it's depicted. Okay, so with that being said, it's nearly time to blow up the Imperial Dome on Lothal. Turns out Hondo's pig friend actually survived. So, oh, never mind. Or not. Because we cut to Gregor, who legitimately dies next to Captain Rex.
And it's gone.
Yeah, I'm just so happy when Filoni's characters die. Ezra enters the Chimera's bridge and confronts Thrawn. Thrawn at first sees this all as a momentary setback, but then the most random thing ever happens. We find out at the last minute, in the very last episode of Star Wars Rebels, that Captain Paleon exists in Disney canon, which is such a huge shocker. But sorry though, this isn't enough for a faithful adaptation given who you killed off earlier. What's even more random than that is where Thrawn and Ezra see those space whales who jump out of hyperspace and completely surround the Chimera. Yeah, so apparently Mart, Vizago, and Worf attracted the space whales and directed them straight towards the Chimera. Thrawn and the Imperials on board are subdued by the space whales, and Ezra pretty much uses the Force to ensure he gets rid of Thrawn. And yeah, as many of you will know, he launches himself and Thrawn into hyperspace to a galaxy far, far away from the Star Wars galaxy. So yeah, Ezra heroically made Thrawn look like a complete ass clown. You also gotta love how Filoni didn't have the guts to kill Thrawn off. Rather, just launch both he and Ezra into another galaxy so they can be useful later whenever he feels like doing another story with them. I scoffed really loudly when I saw all of this. It was ridiculous enough from people's descriptions of space whales, but let's face it, Thrawn failed. Completely and utterly. And he's still alive despite that. I doubt he'll be missed much though. He was pretty useless and didn't achieve much, but still. All the rebels look in awe, and then they get their senses together and remember what they're here to do. Blow up this dome. Apparently the dome is launched up into the air, and I didn't realize it could be flown like a ship, but I guess this is the show's excuse to blow it up and not result in civilian casualties. That's pretty lazy writing, but I don't expect anything less from Filoni. Anyways, Ryder does give Price the option to leave with them, but Governor Price sucks up the loss, and affirms that she'll stay with the Empire to the end, so everyone else goes for pickup, and pretty much the only character who died here is Gregor. Sabine is given the honors to go full Michael Bay on everything, and the whole dome explodes, killing everyone on board, probably including that rebel pilot I mentioned earlier that the writers kinda just forgot about.
And it's gone.
But shh! This is supposed to be a triumph for the good guys here. Then it turns out Ezra left a goodbye message addressing all of those closest to him, minus Kanan cause he's dead, and basically proclaims that he'll enjoy going home when it's time. So yeah, everyone on Lothal is cheering the Ghost on as they all fly away. And then to wrap up this crap, we get an epilogue from Sabine which basically explains what happened to everyone after this. And in fact, the Empire pretty much began to fracture after the fact, and the Empire was finally defeated at Endor. She then explains that Zeb took Kallus to the Lyrasan system and showed him that he didn't completely genocide the Lasat people. Yeah, as I said, Kallus's redemption was unearned, because he'd have a lot to answer for. Sorry to break it to you, but on top of that, Kallus is apparently welcome among the Lasat people. Yeah, right. Next, Sabine talks about Hera along with Captain Rex served at the Battle of Endor, the latter of which is bullshit because he'd be too fucking old. But hey, Filoni makes up his own canon, and according to him, this random rebel was Captain Rex. But apparently Kanan boinked Hera off screen before he died.
And got busy!
Oh, you guys should have known how long I waited to do that joke. So Kanan and Hera have a son named Jason, which will make any expanded universe fan livid. Also, quick question. Don't human Twi'lek hybrids look more like this? Why in the hell does Jason Syndulla look more like a human with Grinch hair? Okay, maybe the hybrid shit works differently for each character born with different parents of different species. Who the hell knows? Anyways, Sabine goes to the center of Lothal or whatever, looks at a memorial of Ezra along with the Ghost Crew family, then she turns and sees Ahsoka in white robes that is subconsciously supposed to tell you that she's very important. And then Sabine tells us that it's time to bring Ezra back home. And thank the Lord, that's Star Wars Rebels in its entirety. I just sat through 75 episodes, most of them totaling at a 20-minute runtime, if not sometimes longer. And it took a lot out of me, but I'm finally done with this crap. So let's recap. It's boring, it's got plot holes, things are made too easy for the good guys, this show has weak villains that don't do much and die pretty quickly. they completely butchered Thrawn and by extension Rook, and I've read the Thrawn trilogy and I can say as much. The animation is a huge downgrade from the Clone Wars. There's not even artistic consistency. The scale of the show is really small. The characters are mostly forgettable or annoying, and a fuck ton of other things. Seriously, I may not like the Clone Wars anymore, but I can still easily say that the Clone Wars was eons superior to Rebels. I imagine a lot of Clone Wars fans would be like, what happened? But the answer to that is very simple. Filoni happened. It's easy to piece together that since he was making a Star Wars show under Kathleen Kennedy instead of George Lucas, and the fact that he continued a lot of bad practices from the Clone Wars, like retconning, lazy writing, dumbing things down, and even things that probably wasn't his fault, like the budget being cut in half, it was a recipe for disaster. This was pretty much Filoni making a Star Wars show, with him mostly in charge for the first time. And also remember that the first 2 seasons at least gave Filoni a lot of freedom to build a new Star Wars canon, so he was given an unthinkable amount of power. Everything seems to just go right for Filoni at the most convenient time. I think the main reason Filoni has such an iron grip on how people think about Star Wars is that he has the advantage of accessibility. There's so many people who will utterly refuse to read the Thrawn trilogy for starters, and some of them will even be like, what's the Thrawn trilogy? Are you talking about the Rebels character? Which you all know annoys me that people know that little about Star Wars. Especially if they want to pretend that they know what they're talking about. Television shows are far more accessible than novels and comics. So anyone mindly invested in Star Wars will base what they know of Star Wars off of what Dave Filoni made. But as I pointed out, Dave Filoni is terrible at Star Wars. He's such a selfish writer who paves over everyone else, has absolutely no shame or humility as he does it, and the fact that he has the mainstream on his side means that we'll probably continue to get his crap instead of, I don't know, legitimate continuations or adaptations of the expanded universe. I mean, Filoni already ruined the expanded universe, and I suppose the only solution now is to flat out remove the Clone Wars from the EU, or Legends, or whatever. Of course, we know that's never gonna happen. Disney will continue to ignore and spite expanded universe fans until the end of time, unless we get a change of leadership with a drastically different mentality. So I guess the point is, Filoni sucks. His shows suck, and all of his shows suck. Final score. I'm not going to give the season or the entire show a score. It doesn't deserve it. This show took a lot out of me. And keep in mind, I saw it twice. One for the first watch, and one for a critical assessment for a review. Doing these shows in detail is a pain in the ass. And I finally get to say it's over. It's finally over. So as for what I'm doing next, I'll probably do the Sad Batch or Ahsoka next, and probably focus a lot of my time on the mainstream shit, because it's a lot of catch up I've got to do, even if I'm done with Rebels. I just want to be up to speed on what Disney's making, and if it means ignoring the expanded universe for a time, then so be it. I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories by mystery boxes?